Hi guys, it's my turn to host the 3 to Inspire challenge over on the Citrus Twist blog today. So I will leave the link to that blog post down below so you can head over and check it out. But I am going to do this challenge in my traveler's notebook rather than a scrapbook layout. So don't be intimidated. You can try any of the challenges in any format that you want. And this is what I'm going with today. So the first thing I'm doing is picking out a background, and the rule for the challenge is to use a dark background. My go-to tends to be light or white backgrounds, so I thought this was a really interesting challenge. Now, the paper in the Life Crafted kit has a couple of different options for a dark background. Instead of the wood grain, I'm going to go with this floral. I just think it goes with my photo really nicely, and luckily I have an extra set of paper this month so that I can cover both sides of my notebook in the same floral pattern. So I'm just using each of the sides, and I'm going to trim it down so that there is it's about 1/8 of an inch border around 3 sides basically. So the 6x8 papers there don't quite cover a traveler's notebook page. There's 1/4 of an inch missing, so I have just trimmed each piece so that there's 1/8 of an inch on each side, and I'm going to try and join them up in the middle as closely as I can. Now, the second rule for the challenge is to create a banner, and I'm going to kind of do this in 2 ways. What I want to do is create a base for my photo to sit on. So I grabbed some white cardstock and I'm just trimming out a banner shape, a pennant anyway. I'm just going to make sure that that's big enough to fit my photo on, and I'm going to put my title on there as well. And it is going to cover up the gap in my page, go across the middle of the book. So I'll show you how I deal with that in just 1 second. I'm just drawing out a point at the middle and up a little bit from the bottom of my rectangle of paper, and then I'm using my paper trimmer just to trim from each corner into that angle. You could probably just as easily have done this with a pair of scissors. I did just want to make sure that it was going to be completely straight, so that's why I use my paper trimmer. So you can see when I put the shape on here, it is going to cover up the half mark on my page, which is why I'm making a tiny little mark there, and I am going to trim that banner shape down later on. But the first thing I want to do is start working my background. And I just want to add a little bit more texture. So I ran that through my sewing machine a couple of times, and you can see here I've left the middle empty. So it's a border around the page rather than a border around each piece of paper, because I'm trying to create this layout in my book as a whole. So now that I've done that, there's not really a lot else that I want to do to my background. It is a super busy pattern, so I'm just going to stick that into my notebook. Now, luckily I am in the very middle of my notebook, so I can very clearly see where the inside of my break needs to go, and I'm just placing these pieces of paper as close to that middle as I can, while still leaving a gap so that when the book folds up, there's not going to be any awkward bumps or pieces pushing against each other. So visually it kind of disappears when you see it as a whole like this, but it just makes the function of the book a lot easier. Now again, to add a bit of texture, I am just using my fingers to sort of roll up and loosen up the edge of the page here. It stops once you get to the stitching, so it is just that tiny little border around the edge, but it does just give a really nice amount of texture, and it flattens completely once you pop your book shut, so you don't have to worry about adding too much bulk or anything there. Now, before I carried on, I did just have to check that I've got my book up the right way, because when I've done all this, I couldn't remember which way was up again. And now I'm going to work on my banner. So I've got all sorts of embellishments here. I've got these little chipboard circles. They're really beautiful. They've got a lot of sort of gold foiling on them. Some of them are completely gold foiled. So I'm just picking out a few that work with my photo, which was just me and my very first live stream ever with my patrons. It was a real challenge for me, and definitely something to celebrate with a page in my notebook. Now I've also got these cork stickers here, and there's really only one that worked nicely with this photo, and it's just the little love heart one. Also, I'm working on quite a small scale, so I don't want to fill up too much at the top here with embellishments. I'm just using just trying to see whether these acetate pieces have that clear covering on them, which they don't, mental note. And I'm going to use just a few of the smaller ones in here. Now I wondered about having this title of Afternoon Ramblings because the colour's really pretty, it goes nicely with the background, and it definitely was the afternoon by the time I finished up my live stream. But I also found this other piece that says sometimes it really is all fun and games, which was also appropriate, so I haven't chosen yet. I'm just picking out the acetate hearts to see which colours of hearts are going to go at the top here. And eventually I sort out that really I don't have a lot of room to work with, so this is probably enough. Now to stick down this acetate, the most helpful suggestion I've ever had was to grab a Xyron machine. I've never been a super fan of acetate, and mostly I was stitching it down or using staples. Someone had suggested, actually multiple people suggested I get a Xyron machine, and I haven't looked back since then. It is definitely my favorite way to attach acetate. These tiny little hearts were slightly harder to put through it. There's a little bit of a gap, but you can see here basically you run it through your machine and you end up with little acetate stickers, which are so easy to work with. The other thing I love about it, which you'll see here, is when I decide not to use all of these, I can just trim off the background and just put it back into my packet of acetate to use as a sticker later on. So it's never really a big deal. Now, I'm not sure that I've mentioned that the third rule for this 3 to Inspire challenge was to use acetate, which is why I've got those little hearts and my title from acetate. So what I'm doing is I'm going to try and create a banner on my banner pennant. That's the second rule there. But before I do that, I just wanted to just mount my photo a little bit to make it pop off the white paper. It was getting a little bit lost. The photo has a white border, and with it sitting on the white background there, it was getting a little bit lost. So I've just picked out a paper that coordinated with the floral on the background there, sort of peachy pinky color, and that works really nicely just to lift that photo a little bit. Now I'm adding those acetate hearts up the top. They've also got that sticky back Xyron, so they're sticking on. Everything's basically stickers up the top there, so I can peel the backing sheet off my chipboard. I've already stuck down my cork, and you can see here I'm playing with the title, and I really do like that, that smaller title, the less colourful one, just a little bit better. Now to finish off my banner at the top, I've added some stitching, which will also help keep some of those pieces in place. And I also stitched around the outside of my photo just to again add that same texture in multiple places across the layout. So I'm pretty good to go now. I can stick down my photo, and I have chosen this lighter, smaller title, so I can stick that down, and I'm going to add one more little chipboard circle here onto the top of my photo, just sort of overlapping everything and joining it all together. And now to stick my banner onto the page, I do need to trim it down. So I was pretty purposeful when I was placing those elements at the top to make sure that nothing was going to overlap where I had to trim the banner down. But you can see once you trim it, it all looks fairly continuous, and again helps with that illusion that it is just one layout. Now I do want to add a little bit of stamping, and that's going to fill in some of the gaps on my banner up here, and the best time to do that is before I go and stick that into my book so I can lay it flat on my desk. And I'm just inking the stamp up once with my Memento Tuxedo black ink, and then repeat stamping it a couple of times. It doesn't make too big of an impact, but it does fill up those little gaps at the top of my banner up there. And then I can go ahead and stick this down onto my page, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to line this up with the edge of the pattern paper, so that leaves that little gap down the middle and continues to make this notebook totally functional. But you can see how these Traveler's Notebook spreads translate really well to the same sort of 12 by 12 layout. It's basically the same size, it's just a slightly different scale. So any sketches or challenges that you see for 12 by 12 layouts, will work just as nicely in your traveler's notebook. Now I wanted to add a tiny bit of white onto this background just to tie it all together, so I'm using some Liquitex white ink to create some splatters onto the background. I'm even dotting them on with my paintbrush just to try and get some larger ones. And then I'm going to do the same thing onto the white banner shape, but using some black ink. And if you've watched any of my videos before, you know I'm not a huge fan of splatters because they are so unpredictable, so uncontrollable, and I really suck at them. So I'm adding just a few around the same places. I've sort of created 3 areas where I'm putting the splatters, and I'm going to do a couple down the bottom and 1 up the top. And what I don't intend to do is splatter all over my face on the photo. So there you go. Note to self, don't do like I do. Cover up your photo first, just in case. I'm not a big fan of having to reprint photos because of mistakes like this. It's a waste of photo paper, it's a waste of time, but I couldn't live with this huge black smudge on my face, so I peeled off the chipboard and reprinted my photo in exactly the same size. Now I'm also being super careful because I have not let all this ink dry yet, so I'm definitely not wanting to smudge that again, but I've printed my photo in exactly the same size so I can put it down in the same place. I do need to add some glue to my chipboard since I peeled off the backing. And there, you'll never know that I made that giant mistake. Don't forget to head over to the Citrus Twist blog and check out this challenge and post any of your entries over on the Citrus Twist fan page. I had a real blast doing this one. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep watching, there's a couple more videos on screen, or why not check out my Patreon page? There are even more videos over there. Otherwise, I'll see you again real soon. Bye!